Welcome to part 1 of Conversation and Wine. In this series of videos, I will just talk for a very long time whilst drinking wine. So there will not be much structure to this series. I will just riff about certain themes. The wine this time is called Goats to Rome, and it's from New Zealand, and I bought it because I like the label, and it is a blend of several grapes. Now let's pour it, and let's comment. Now I was just thinking about certain philosophers recently. I was thinking about John Rawls, which is I guess it's a crime that I haven't read the primary text yet, and I'm making a video and I'm talking about him. But I've been thinking about some of the stuff he said. Just reading secondary stuff. I know it's pretty criminal, but I'm a criminal, philosophical criminal. It just takes me so long to read books. Plus, I'm working full time now, and I don't have much time to read anymore, alas. He obviously the famous book Theory of Justice, and he has that famous veil of ignorance in which we have a society of people, and they're amnesiacs. We don't know who they are. We don't know what position they have in society. We don't know about their class. We don't know about their ethnicity. We don't know how intelligent they are. We don't know what their skills are. We don't know anything about them. So we can't decide whether if this society can be meritocratic or anything, because we don't know anything about the individuals who comprise the society. And basically, John Rawls comes up with a constitution for this society of amnesiacs, this veil of ignorance. And he comes out with two principles. The first principle is each citizen of this society will have an equal basic right. Everyone has the same right. The whole of society has the same right to liberty, to pursue what they find meaningful in life. The equal basic liberties. The second principle is social and economic inequalities can only be permitted if they satisfy two conditions. The first condition is that these social and economic inequalities must benefit the people in the lowest rungs of society. They must benefit from the social and economic inequalities. They must enjoy a decent quality of life. So the inequalities must be justified on that condition. The second condition in which those social economic inequalities must be justified are that there must be fair, equal access, equal quality of opportunity. People in the lowest rungs of society must have opportunities to thrive and hopefully to mobilize upwards. And also, Rawls talks about a fair distribution of resources. They should have a fair distribution on. They should have access to education and healthcare, hopefully provided by the state or some sort of. They should have the equal fair access. They should have the same access to education and health as the people in the higher echelons of society. And obviously, there's been critiques of Rawls from the right and from the left. Obviously, on the right, there you have Robert Nozick, who's basically like John Rawls. He's a liberal. John Rawls is a liberal, and Robert Nozick is a liberal. But Nozick criticizes him from the right, saying that a redistribution of resources, taxing individuals in the higher echelons of society, is unjust for Nozick, because what Nozick wants is a free market where we have free transactions and the market economy is the result of free human action, and we should just leave it as it be, complete laissez-faire. And every transaction is just because it is made by free rational choice. And so any inequality that arises from that free choice is just for Nozick, and he sees any intervention in the economy and any kind of redistribution as theft. And I've I've heard all this kind of stuff like from a lot of libertarians who see social programs as a form of authoritarianism, because they think you're taxing from people and you're giving it to others, and they see that as a form of theft and as a form of authoritarianism, which to be honest, I find that kind of a peculiar argument. And from then there's not so this is in the hard left, but there's a communitarian critique of Rawls, because Rawls is liberal, and there's a communitarian critique, particularly from someone like Michael Sandel, who writes that the veil of ignorance, we can't even imagine a veil of ignorance, even from a hypothetical perspective, because the we do not know this society of amnesiacs have no ties to each other, and the society of amnesiacs is we can't even foresee that even from a hypothetical scenario, because we are always encumbered. We always have ties. We have ties to a family, and those ties determine who we are. We grow up in a family, we grow up in a community, and the community and our relationships with others determine our character. So Michael Sandel has this phrase called the unencumbered self, and he says that is not even possible, because we cannot even be. We are always by nature encumbered to others. We're encumbered to society, and we're encumbered to a community. Which is, I guess there's some truth in that, but I still, I still very much, I'm more drawn to someone like John Rawls than to Michael Sandel, because John Rawls has this idea that about there's this main tenet of liberalism, which is opposed to communitarianism, is a neutrality about the good life. That's what's good and valuable should be something ultimately up to the individual, and it should be up to individuals to determine for themselves what they find meaningful, which is obviously what makes you happy. What makes you what you find meaningful is very subjective. And that varies across. That's so subjective, and what people find meaningful, it varies among individuals drastically. And communitarians and people like Sandals emphasize we should emphasize social solidarity and those bonds, which is fine. Like if you value communitarianism, go for it. You're entitled to it by all means. But I'm not particularly community minded myself. But I don't have no problems with someone being part of a community. But I should not be forced to have communitarian values. I don't particularly have materialistic values either. Because communitarians often critique the culture of materialism, and I'm not particularly materialistic, and I'm not particularly communitarian, and that's what you get in a liberal democracy, and that's what Rawls defended, was a plurality of values. Now let's have a bit of the wine. And then there's the kind of hard left where you get like people. I don't think this comes from Noam Chomsky, but it's that kind of strain, the Chomsky kind of people who say that the problem with Rawls is theory of veil of ignorance, is that the people in the lowest echelons of society, they might stay there and they don't have a say in how the economy is run. There's no economic democracy, so people in the lowest echelons of society, they don't get a say in how the economy is run, and they often don't even have the opportunity to run for positions of office for political. They don't get to run for office and determine the laws, how everyone is run and how their lives are run and how their communities are run. So that that kind of hard left critique of Rawls is that it doesn't empower working class people, basically, which is, I don't know what to say about that, to be honest. I mean, I've worked in very hard. I've had shit jobs. I've never had a proper job. I've always had shit jobs. And I'm currently working at a warehouse, and I know how hard that kind of menial labor is, and they don't often earn very much, and they often go back home, and they struggle to make ends meet. So I definitely sympathise. I definitely get why there's a need for that kind of politics. I definitely get it. But they often go too far the other way, though, like empowering working class people to determine how their laws are made, and they should be involved in the economy, when In fact, most of these people don't want to be, don't want to, don't want to, they don't want to run the economy. They don't want to have economic democracy. They don't want to determine how the how to they don't want to get involved in running the factory or determining how these things affect them, because at the end of the day they want to go to their shift and they want to go back home and they want a decent wage and they want decent living conditions. And what Rawls offers is in his hypothetical veil of ignorance is the second principle, is that those social and economic inequalities, they should benefit the least worse off, and they should also have an opportunity, a fair, they should have the opportunity to mobilize upwards. And any decent liberal social democracy, whatever you want to call it, liberal social democracy, should have the fair access to mobilize upwards. You should have those opportunities to get out of the terrible situation you're in. So you should have, safety nets, which many libertarians like Nozick even oppose. They even oppose safety nets. They even oppose that kind of thing. All right, so on to the next one, which is Karl Popper. Obviously wrote, and again, I have both of those books. Like right there is the one of those shelves of the books I'm going to read next, and I got Theory of Justice, and I've also got The Open Society and Its Enemies by Karl Popper, which looks like both of those books really, really appeal to me. The arguments in them. So Karl Popper wrote Open Society and Its Enemies during the Second World War, when he fled Germany. He fled Nazi Germany during the Second World War and went to New Zealand and wrote this book called Open Society and Its Enemies. And Open Society and Its Enemies. Obviously, at the time, you had fascism, you had Nazis, and they'd taken power of Germany, and it was obviously a totalitarian society. And totalitarianism is a word that's so used so often, it's tossed around so often. So what does totalitarianism mean? Totalitarianism, it means government controls totality of society. They control everything of society. The government, the state controls everything. They control the economy, and they also control the private lives of the individual to the degree that they control the private life of the individual to the degree that they control his thoughts. So when the individual goes to sleep, he dreams about the government. He dreams about Nazi propaganda, whatever it is. And obviously, Karl Popper thought this was abhorrent, and that's why Open Society and Its Enemies is a defense of an open society, of a liberal democracy. And he critiques three famous philosophers from the past, and they argued in favor of a closed society. So you have Plato, you have Hegel, and you have Marx. Plato was crazy in the Republic. He wrote about eugenics. He thought that families should be, there should be no families, that people should be taken apart from the families, and the people who are weaker should be taken away and killed and exterminated, and the strongest people should go through this regimentation, whereby they start off with geometry and arithmetic, and then they go on when they're 18. They start reading. They go to the army and they fight, and then after that they start reading philosophy in the 20s, and then they become these. Then hopefully you get this philosopher king who will rule. This guy at the top who's very wise, and he can determine who he can determine what's good for the whole society. This kind of autocratic strongman who's also a philosopher. I mean, like Plato or Socrates or whatever. And he also wanted to ban music, ban poetry, because it was imagination, and that was deceptive because it didn't show the truth. And philosophy shows the truth. It is the pursuit of truth, whereas poetry is just made up stuff. And like in ancient Greece, they always started when they were young. Educated people would read the Odyssey by Homer, and Plato hated that the young people were taught Homer, because he thought that they were being taught falsehoods. So obviously there's that example from antiquity of a closed society, and then we get Hegel, and Hegel said that the state precedes the individual. The individual does not exist. All that you have is the state, and the state embodies the whole community. And obviously that's completely liberal, and that's another example of a closed society. And then you get Marx, and obviously Marx wanted to abolish capitalism, and um, um, obviously workers should run the economy. And obviously there was a transitional period whereby you have socialism, and then after socialism you transition to capitalism, and then obviously socialism would be a state-run economy, and then with no private property, and then from that you transition to no state and a worker-run economy with no state and no private property, and the economy would be run by the workers. And Popper also thinks this is another example of a closed society. So all these marvelous thinkers that you obviously they're so people put them on a pedestal. Oh, Marx or Hegel or Plato, you can never criticize them. And Popper thought you should definitely criticize them because some of their ideas were very sinister. Obviously, Marx, obviously some of his stuff led to the Soviet Union. Uh, Lenin, when Lenin came to power, he was imposing a Leninist Marxist regime, and obviously uh, Plato. The stuff when you read the Republic, it's just crazy. It's crazy, and there's a Labour Party politician, Richard Crossman, wrote a novel in I think he wrote it in the 40s or the 30s, in which Plato comes to the 40s, and he sees Europe, and he sees the fascist Germany embodies the ideals of Plato in the Republic. Obviously, Richard Crossman, a British Labour Party politician, thought that Plato prefigured fascism back in antiquity. All right, so that's enough on Popper. What else did I want to talk about? Oh yeah, some thoughts about like the welfare. No, I read this quote from I just Gore Vidal is just this brilliant. He comes out with all this witty stuff all the time, and I just opened the book at random. I hadn't read it because my dad gave it to me because he knew I liked Gore Vidal, and I just opened it at random, and you get these brilliant witty quotes. It's just full of these witty quotes, and I just opened it, and at random I just found something which I found quite funny. That is, in Sweden they have free healthcare, they have free education, but they also have free love. Although that's not, I don't know if that's entirely fair, because I've met a Swedish person, and I think that I mean you shouldn't generalize by it's just by one individual, but I do think it's true that Swedes on the whole are rather prudish, but on the whole it just they're not all, that might be a bit of a myth that they're all into pornography and free love and free sex and all that kind of stuff when they're in fact rather prudish people. But it captures what I think is a good thing, that we can have free. In fact, what's actually happened even, that we can have free, open, liberal, democratic societies, but we can also have these good social programs like free health, free education, free healthcare, and that the two are not at all mutually incompatible. And uh, in fact, obviously, you have the regimes like Cuba, or totalitarian regimes like Cuba, like the Soviet Union, where they have those free programs, but they're not free, open, democratic, tolerant societies. But we have in Europe, we have Sweden, Germany, Denmark, all these places which are free, open, liberal, democratic societies, but they also have these free healthcare programs. And I'm all for that. I'm all for having free healthcare, free education, but also have pornography, those pagan values of pornography and free love and orgies all the time, and have as much fun as possible without harming anyone. And I don't see it as decadent in the slightest. I don't see it as decadent. In fact, it's brilliant. And uh, um, although the pagan stuff they obviously had the sacrifices, but let's retain the Epicureanism. The Epicureanism which says have as much pleasure as possible and pursue pleasure and have much fun as possible and don't feel guilty about it. And that's why Epicureanism is the polar opposite of Christianity, because Christianity tells you must feel guilty if you enjoy pleasure. You must feel guilty. And Epicureanism, which came before Christianity, was a school of thought. And Christianity was kind of derived from cynicism, another school of thought in Greece. It was derived maybe from Stoicism, but mainly from cynicism, but not from Epicureanism, which said you should seek to maximize pleasure. And another thing about Epicureanism said that when you die, you just die and you don't go to some spiritual heavenly place. So yeah, so that's my thought on free love and free sex and decadence, and we should pursue. Don't feel guilty about enjoying something or pursuing things that make you feel pleasure. It's all good. It's all good, you know. As you're not harming anyone, well, who cares, you know. So that's so I've been talking about political philosophy, and now I will talk about art because I really like art as well. And basically, I've watched this film recently called. I've watched it. I first watched it. I'm now 30 years old, believe it or not. And I first watched this film when I was 17, and it's always left a permanent. It's just made a dent on my brain. It's just so much images that are so dreamlike. It's called Lost Highway by David Lynch, and it's just like Lynch always reminds me. Like I go to bed, and I wake up, and I dream some really weird shit. And I wake up and I think, what the fuck was that? You know, and I get that from Lynch films. They have these striking images, and you watch them and you think, what in good heavens was that? You know, what was that? And it's what I also like about his films is that they have this kind of that Lost Highway is very similar to another film called Mulholland Drive, and they have these kind of parallel worlds which often intersect with each other. And one world is like a kind of dream psychosis schizophrenic world, and the other world is the real world. And in Lost Highway, it starts off with the very not for that long with the real world, and then it goes into this schizophrenic dreamlike space. Whereas Mulholland Drive, for most of the film, you're in this schizophrenic dreamlike place, thinking you're in the real world, and then it ends with the real world, which is obviously very jarring. But it just has these striking images that it just reminds me of a lot of stuff that I dream about. It's just the word for it is oniric, dreamlike. It just you go to sleep and you dream. Your brain goes to sleep, and the logic. I'm not an expert on dreams, but your brain. It's just electricity in your brain, and it comes up with all this stuff that's bizarre. And I particularly like a lot of his films for that reason. They just capture what it's like to dream. It's illogical, and it just seems at the same time it's illogical and it's weird. But it seems to be charged with meaning. They seem to mean something when they probably don't mean anything. But you look for symbolism in dreams, and there's so much academic writing on David Lynch interpreting it and saying it means whatever, you know, it's psychoanalytic, whatever, blah blah blah, interpretation of David Lynch. And who's the? Oh yeah, and another artist I like is Stravinsky, because I think classical music might be. I like a lot of different genres of music, but classical music might be my favorite genre because I love, especially like the modern stuff. Not so much the modern stuff after the Second World War. Maybe like my favorite period is the modern classical music just before the Second World War. So Bartok, Stravinsky, Debussy, Ravel, all those people, because I love listening and hearing all these. What I like about a lot of classical music, not just modern classical music, is that you listen to the patterns and how these different parts interact with each other. But the best art has that kind of. It has the ideas that make you think and appreciate how this stuff is put together. But it also has most of the best art has that aspect to it. But it also has an emotional aspect of it, so it does excite you in an emotional level. But Stravinsky, I love it's at the same time he's one of the probably most accessible composers of the 20th century, because you get people like Schoenberg and all that kind of stuff. But I love the angularity of his melodies, and it's quite rhythmic as well. It's got a pulse to it. When you listen to Rite of Spring, it's dun 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 and dun, and that's really rhythmic. Or I bet it's not just like people always think of him of Pulcinella. Not Pulcinella, of Petrushka, of Rite of Spring and Firebird. But I like all of his a lot of his stuff he made after that is brilliant. Like symphonies of wind instruments, Pulcinella, Symphony of Psalms, so much stuff. Concerto for for 8 wind instruments. I just I like the angularity of the melodies. I like how they interact with each other, and I like the rhythms that go alongside it. And it's just wonderful to hear how he's put all of this together. He's just masterful. Uh, all right, so that's part 1 of Conversation and Wine. Thank you for tuning in.